Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Through a Scanner Gnostically. This is a new series I'm doing where I examine all things metaphysical from the spiritual war, ascension, the simulation, the matrix, and I do all that through the lens of my own personal Gnostic belief system that is ever evolving. This second episode is titled Through a Scanner Gnostically Part 2, Upgrading from NPC to PC. How Dungeons & Dragons is the ideal analogy for describing the spiritual war and our role within it. So the first episode I discussed kind of my introduction to Gnosticism when I met a full-blown Gnostic back in 1999, and then subsequently upon his recommendation, I went to go see the movie The Matrix, and I was lucky enough to see it in the theaters when it first came out, having no idea at all what to expect. He kind of piqued my interest. I wasn't going to go see it because I saw the previews, and it just seemed like a kind of hacker sci-fi movie that I just wasn't interested in. I thought it was like a VR, virtual reality kind of thing, and that was all the rage back in the late 90s. Heading into the millennium. And I was pleasantly blown away, surprised by how good it was, and just how it kind of just captured the zeitgeist. And it was one of those kind of slow burns. I don't think in the theaters it got the kind of attention that it later ended up building. And then, of course, the pressure to make the sequels came upon the directors, Wachowski sisters, and they made two other ones. A lot of people think they're lesser movies than the first one. I just think that it was such an ambitious kind of overall epic arc that they were exploring, that those movies had some flaws for sure. I think most of the flaws, in my opinion, were the special effects and the overlong fighting scenes. But I kind of like the philosophy of it, the architect idea, which totally falls in line with Gnosticism, and the demiurge, which is a Greek word for architect. And without any further ado, I'm going to get into reading my article here. This is published on Medium. Through a Scanner Gnostically, Part 2, Upgrading from NPC to PC, How Dungeons & Dragons is the ideal analogy for describing the spiritual war and our role within it. So I'm starting with an elevator pitch and a bus ride pitch. The elevator pitch is the time it takes to explain a story idea to somebody in the length of time it takes to go into an elevator with them to a floor or whatever. That's the idea. And then the bus ride pitch, same idea, but instead of an elevator ride, it's the length of time it takes to go from one stop to your other stop to explain somebody sitting next to you. I don't know if that's an actual thing, but that's what I came up with. So here is the elevator pitch. This is my elevator pitch, my thesis for this article. The human is to her higher self as a player character, or PC, in a game of Dungeons & Dragons is to the person playing her, or the avatar of a video game is to the person playing the video game. In other words, I, as Damien Sibuyan, am the avatar, or the PC, that my higher self is playing from beyond this dimension. This is the case with everyone. When we look at this dynamic through a Gnostic lens, the elevator pitch expands into more of a bus ride pitch. It takes a little more time to express it. And this is my bus ride pitch. We are pure light beings known as aeons who have made agreements with other aeons to come down into this dimension known as the material world of Earth, to play the grand adventure of saving the world and the beings therein from the destructive programming of separation consciousness and to restore our connection with heart-based consciousness. Many are calling this dynamic a spiritual war. When we win this war, we will effectively return the planet to its Edenic status, essentially making a heaven on earth. The game of Dungeons & Dragons represents the ideal metaphor for the dynamic of how we can transform our egos from non-player character status into player character adventuring status. In D&D and D&D type games, whether the conventional tabletop variety or the more modern video game format, the PCs or avatars have enemies to fight. That's what makes this analogy more comprehensively accurate than other metaphors used to explain our reality. As Aeons, our primary enemies are the Archons, malevolent beings who have programmed humans into separation consciousness for the purpose of feeding off of their light. Archons are parasitic beings who operate from the shadows of the fifth dimension and who require the light of living beings to survive. Without it, they believe, they will die. In truth, Archons are the shadows of Aeons and can be brought back into the light with the weapon of divine love. The greater challenge for a human is to remember that she is an Aeon, and that from the realm of the Aeon she had essentially rolled up a character known as Cindy Beale, for example. If Cindy Beale realizes her divine nature and begins the process of connecting to that nature, she will move from NPC status to PC status. An NPC, or non-player character, is a human who believes in and is a victim of the separation consciousness programming of the Archons. An NPC believes he is Ralph, for example, the auto mechanic with a drinking problem and a wife who just left him for another woman. Ralph isn't consciously connected to his Aeon self, and so his Aeon self has little agency except to shine love and energy into Ralph to keep him alive in the hopes that he will eventually remember his true nature, which may take many lifetimes. Those awakened to their Aeonic selves are now finding members of their soul tribe, which is the same as the adventuring party in D&D. When they find their soul tribe of other Aeons, they will be given specific missions to accomplish that will help move the Earth into heart-based unity consciousness. Every soul tribe's mission is unique to those groups, just as every Aeon's PC is unique to that soul tribe. My goal in examining role-playing games as an analogy for the spiritual war is to inspire myself and anyone else who could use some inspiration into embodying more and more of who we really are, angels on earth, and that we designed these bodies and these personalities to reflect our angelic natures. This means that, like a group of D&D characters, we are way more powerful than we've been led to believe. Those powers will begin to unlock themselves the more we open and balance our energy centers, especially the heart chakra, because it is through the heart chakra that we connect with our Aeon. The more opened and balanced these energy centers become, the higher the levels we climb, just like in D&D. So that was the elevator pitch, followed by the bus ride pitch. So before I explore my thesis further, let me take you back in time to the days of my younger self. Was I always this crazy? I think you'll agree that yes, I was. To this day, the most impactful Christmas present that I've ever received was the Dungeons & Dragons First Edition box set. I remember that moment well, frozen in time as I marveled at the artifact of wonder before me with its evocative illustration of a spear-wielding warrior and a scantily clad female mage confronting a green dragon inside of some dank subterranean dungeon. The game's promise was right there on the cover, speaking to me in a deep-throated movie trailer voice. "Yes, Damien, you too can be a dragon slayer. Why don't you open the box and learn how to unleash the hero within?" The year was 1981, and I was 10 years old. The 1980s was a complicated decade to grow up in. On one hand, it was a childhood paradise, free from the shackles of overprotective parenting. I walked or rode my bike everywhere without any supervision, or safety gear for that matter. I spent hours playing with my friends out in the woods, walking the train tracks, building ramshackle forts out of abandoned plywood and rusty recycled nails. As stereotypical latchkey kids, my brothers and my friends learned to be quite resourceful and adventurous. We always seemed to have fireworks to play with, and plenty of abandoned lots to set them off in, and we never had to worry about getting caught because as long as we were home in time for dinner, it didn't seem to matter what we did. On the other hand, with so little adult supervision, if you became a target for bullies, like I was, you were on your own. School offered no protection. I mean, most of the fights I got into or witnessed from the sidelines happened in the locker room at the end of gym class. The teacher's philosophy for behavioral management was let them work it out. I found school and the world of adults in general to be as stifling as it was boring. I couldn't understand why adults who didn't have parents ordering them around and could do anything they wanted would choose to build a world like this. I was so obsessed with that question that by the time I was 10, I had worked it all out, and it actually kind of holds up if you look at it through a Gnostic lens. When I examined the limited amount of information I had, or rather that I paid attention to, I had determined that sometime in the not-too-distant past, humanity had split itself in two. On one side, we had the cowboys. The cowboys represented the world of guns and money and ownership of land, competition, war, technology, waste, and hard living. On the other side, there were the Indians. The Indians represented the world of harmony with nature, balance and cooperation among tribes, the bow and arrow, open plains, an abundance of animals, freedom, fun, and spiritual expression. The cowboys used to live on one side of the world and the Indians on the other side. But then the cowboys invaded the land of the Indians, and because they had guns and more advanced technology, and because they were just plain mean and nasty, the cowboys prevailed. Before D&D came into my life, my most elaborate fantasies involved me living as a Plains Indian hunting bison and communing with the animals. My two best friends were a golden eagle and a wolf, and my greatest skill was I could shoot an arrow over a mile away and hit my target every time. In Gnostic terms, the Indians in my simplistic social analysis represented the aeonic light within us, and the cowboys represented the archontic darkness within us that came to take over the entire world. Naturally, I wasn't thinking that complicated about it back then. That's just my interpretation of it now. But when D&D entered my life, my fantasy world vastly expanded. D&D was invented by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson and published by the fledgling, at the time, gaming company TSR, which stands for Tactical Studios Rules Incorporated. It was invented in 1974. Gygax and Arneson borrowed heavily from Greek, Norse, Celtic, Roman, and other ancient mythologies, but were most obviously influenced by the fantasy world of J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth. Rather than merely watching these epic fantasy adventures on the screen or reading about them in books, Dungeons & Dragons gave young boys and girls, though back then it was mostly boys, let's be honest, the opportunity to visit those worlds firsthand and immersively explore them. You didn't just watch Legolas slaying orcs with his precision bow and arrow artistry. You became Legolas. You inhabited the skin, personality, ethos, and mighty power of these heroes, and when it was time to go home for dinner, you set your character down and returned to the real world with stories to share about solving riddles, conquering goblin hordes, and rescuing the oppressed from the oppressors. You returned to the game the next day, prepared to continue where the D&D party had left off. Some of my group's D&D campaigns took years to complete, as we progressed our characters from first level all the way to 20th level. Other sessions might be one-offs, where we would run pre-generated characters for a single 5-hour adventure module. Whatever the case may be, when I played a character, that character meant almost as much to me as I did to me. In some cases, even more. Because in the world of fantasy role-playing, my character as Roland the Cleric of Tyr, for example, wielded way more authority, more agency, more freedom to explore all his gifts and talents than did Damien the 7th grader, who had to go to piano lessons every Tuesday and had to do the dishes every night after dinner, then go upstairs to do his homework after he could be set free to play with his friends or watch The Incredible Hulk on his 10-inch black and white TV. The modern world, to me, represented the kind of corrupt kingdom that a veteran group of high-level stalwart adventurers might embark on rescuing. Which brings me to extending the D&D metaphor to its natural conclusion. Imagine, there are 5 young people in a room, sitting around a table. One of them, Jeff, is playing the role of Game Master. The people who are playing the game with Jeff, the Game Master, are named Kyra, Miara, Isabella, and Scott. The Game Master has created his world for the 4 others around the table to play. But it's impossible for the 4 people to enter the world as themselves, so they have to make characters called player characters, or PCs. These 4 PCs are named Kyril, played by Kyra, Lorelei, played by Miara, Brella, played by Isabella, and Tank, played by Scott. Kyril is a half-orc barbarian, Lorelei is a halfling rogue, Brella is a human paladin, and Tank is a gnome sorcerer. Everyone is in 5th level, which means they're a pretty tough crew capable of many amazing feats of bravery, but they'd probably get their butts kicked if they had to face off against a demi-lich or a beholder. This is what a beholder looks like. The Game Master's role is to create, organize, and roleplay the consciousness of the universe in which the PCs will be exploring, using an agreed-upon set of rules and standards, the game system, known as Dungeons & Dragons. Although Jeff has a deep knowledge of the universe he is role-playing, he only actually needs to reference the setting and the NPCs, non-player characters, that are in the immediate perspectives of the PCs. For example, when the PCs begin the adventure in their local tavern to check out the latest gossip about all the hoopla in the neighboring kingdom of Arconix and how that hoopla has spread to the land they are currently inhabiting, the GM focuses his attention on the tavern, the staff, and the clientele. He'll describe for the PCs everything that's going on that might be of interest to them. When the GM describes a man in the corner by the fireplace with an eye patch who has been eyeing them, no pun intended, for some time, the PCs will see this as a clue to investigate. Perhaps the eye-patched gentleman has some leads they can check out. Or is he a spy from the neighboring kingdom? The GM does not force the players to do anything. He simply describes the physics of the universe and the activities therein. When a PC informs the GM that she is going to do something, the GM will describe what happens. And this is an example of such an exchange. So we have Kyril, and she's talking to the other 3 PCs. Something don't smell right with that bloke near that fireplace. I'm going to mosey on over to see what I can see. Get ready, y'all, just in case. And the GM might say to Kyra, the one playing Kyril. So Kyril walks over to the man with the eye patch? Kyra. She sure does. The GM will narrate the situation. As you wind your way through the swelling crowd of mostly human clientele on your way towards the stranger, you are suddenly intercepted by a boisterous, overly friendly bard who recognizes you as one of the heroes that rescued the young prince who had fallen into the dark well of terror a few moons back. He explains that he's written a song honoring your bravery and would be extremely honored if you'd allow him to perform it for you and the other PCs. Kyril would say to the bard, "Not right now, Mr. Bard, you see." And the bard would say, "The name is Del Lute, because I play the lute, and I'm into chemistry. Get it? Del Lute?" Great, wonderful. I would love to hear the song, but awesome sauce. Let me just find a table to jump on. I don't have time for this right now. Then Miara might interrupt. Can we see what's going on with Kyril? She would ask the GM. The GM would respond, that depends. Were you paying attention to her as she left your group? And Miara would respond, most definitely, GM. Then yes. And then Miara, great. While Tyrell is being hassled, I go towards the eye patch dude. The GM would roll dice behind his GM screen to determine something the PCs can't be privy to. And then you narrate. As a rogue who is used to moving nimbly through crowds, you easily make your way to the fireplace. But upon arrival, you notice the man is gone. But your perceptive eyes spot a folded up piece of parchment by a lone burning candle. What do you do? This interaction illustrates the basic dynamics of how a game of D&D and any other number of tabletop role-playing games are played. It's akin to an incredibly organized and structured theater of the mind improv play without an audience. It may help as we extend this metaphor further to think of D&D like a play. The director is like the GM. The actors are like the people around the table playing specific roles. The PCs are the specific roles that the actors are playing, and the adventure is the play itself. So, with all that preamble in mind, I have found it extremely rewarding for me to perceive my existence as if my ego personality is the hero in my own D&D adventure campaign agreed upon from my higher self perspective with other higher selves. Our soul group, so to speak, agreed to, quote, play this adventure, unquote, of life on Earth the same way that Jeff, Kyra, and the others agreed to play a game of D&D. The Life on Earth campaign begins with my ego's birth and ends with my ego's death. The basic campaign setting is the planet Earth during the late 20th and early 21st centuries. The continent that most of my adventures have been taking place in is North America, the country, the United States of America, the state, well, various ones, including New York, Michigan, California, Montana, Arkansas, Ohio, and North Carolina. Yeah, I've moved around a lot. Notice that I identified my ego as being the hero in this adventure. That's because my ego isn't my true self. My ego is the role I play in this lifetime. It's my temporary identity or my player character. Damien Benjamin Sabuyan is my PC's name, and as Damien, I wear many hats. I'm a writer, a teacher, a dad, a middle-aged English-speaking American who is currently residing in North Carolina and who started off the year 2024 by severely spraining my ankle while playing basketball with a group of 5th graders during recess. As Damien, I've come to understand that there is much more to the world than the various roles I play. I've come to see that I am a PC who has lived countless lifetimes as other PCs on this and other planes of existence. I've also come to realize that this specific time and place is very unique. Humanity and all of life on this planet at this time are on the precipice of a great transformation. We are about to break the chains of our bondage to the material world as we awaken to the fact that there is more to this reality than the material world. In fact, the material world represents but a sliver of what reality is really all about. That realization will result, in theory, to a new awareness, and a completely new relationship will blossom between us and the planet we live on. Given this knowledge, I now look back at my life from the perspective of a player character who spent a lot of time and effort in denial of his soul's purpose of being a player character with a mission to find his adventuring partners, his soul group's individual PCs, and get to work in fulfilling his destiny of preparing for and helping along the ascension process of the planet. If this were an actual Dungeons & Dragons campaign theme, it would be multiverse level ambitious and sweepingly epic. And yet, it's my reality. It's all of our reality for those who want to drop their unconscious NPC status and begin to embody their fully aware PC destiny. What is a non-player character, or NPC? Well, in D&D, NPCs are essential for the game and are often there to supply anything from atmospheric window dressing to key clues and information for a successful adventure. Sometimes they will even tag along with the adventuring party and fight battles with them. The man with the eye patch in the above scenario is a good example of an important NPC. He is an NPC because there is no separate person at the table playing him. He's more or less a program of the game and is managed by the game master. However, I've played lots of games where an NPC has turned into a PC because a friend of ours wanted to join the campaign and we didn't want to waste the time rolling up a character for him. This happened a couple of years ago. As the game master, I had created a key NPC named Lucky, a halfling rogue fence with a ring of blinking and lots of connections to the seedy underworld of a rugged seaport town. As an NPC, he had a clearly defined role, or program, and his desires and motivations became integral to him as a separate being, but only when he was interacting with the PCs. His destiny as an NPC was undefined and most likely bleak. He would probably get killed by an underworld thug for underselling some artifact. But Lucky got lucky, and he discovered his destiny was much more vast than he could have previously realized as an incomplete, unrealized sovereign being playing the role of an NPC. Our friend Jason wanted to join the campaign as a PC, and he had always been attracted to the rogue archetype, so he gladly took on Lucky as his character. In metaphysical terms, Lucky finally connected with his higher self, Jason. And Jason could enter the world of the game and add his soul or spirit to that world. The NPC had stopped being a program. He was now a true sovereign being with agency and free will. Most people I interact with on a daily basis, I would classify as NPCs, not because they don't have a soul. I mean, all beings have souls. An NPC in this world is like Lucky before he connected with his higher self, Jason. He identified himself as a specific individual, and all his programming was based on that identification. For most of my adult life, I lived as an NPC. I would get glimpses of my higher self, and I even connected for about 8 to 10 years with my higher self in such a way as to embody my PC hero. This was when I was a father practicing Buddhist meditation. My purpose was clear to me. My life felt vital and important. I had specific missions to carry out, and I was plugged into my heart, which is how we connect to our higher selves. That doesn't mean I was a consistently awakened, enlightened being during that time. It just means I was identifying more as a PC and less as an NPC. So much so that after a 5-day water fast followed by an amazing sweat lodge experience in 2004, I had my first actual awakening experience. Like Lucky connecting with Jason and truly embracing his sovereign self as a PC in his own adventure with his soul family, the adventuring party of other PCs, my Kundalini shot from my root chakra all the way out of my crown chakra, went straight to the moon, absorbed my soul essence that was trapped there, and yes, I realize how crazy that sounds, and then it returned into my body as my higher self. I had established samadhi, essentially, with my higher self, and kept that samadhi going for about 10 days. The samadhi dynamic meant that my bodies, my mental, emotional, energetic, and physical bodies were fully inhabited by my higher self. As my higher self, I was in complete bliss and happiness. Everything I saw was beautiful, and I witnessed in everyone their true soul essences. At that time, I could tell someone, Namaste, and it would be real. But unfortunately, because I was relatively new to spirituality and meditation, I'd only been practicing for 4 years, the samadhi didn't stick. I didn't become the next Eckhart Tolle. An event happened that triggered my ego back into the driver's seat of my body-mind complex. A year later, my wife, Heidi, who I had mentioned in the previous essay video, took the children and she left. A spiral of guilt, shame, anger, regret, and depression ensued, and it didn't take long for me to abandon all of my spiritual practices, replacing them with a bottomless whiskey bottle. It was like my higher self had left the table of the D&D game, and my PC became an NPC again, managed by the program of the Game Master. I remained an NPC for about 13 years straight. Although looking back at those times, I can see that my higher self and my spirit team had always been with me. They were sending me little messages from time to time. Sometimes the messages were very dramatic, like the fire that consumed my home and all of my worldly possessions, save the clothes I was wearing and the vehicles I owned. My partner Andrea lost everything in that fire too. The fire triggered her to quit drinking, but it took me another 5 years before I finally summoned up the strength to quit and reclaim my life. And on my birthday in 2018, that's exactly what I did. Since then, I've been on the hunt for my soul tribe, my adventuring party, and in those 6 years, I found a few of them, and we have made quick work of joining our powers and living out the beginning stages of this next amazing adventure campaign of healing ourselves and the world around us. All right, so this is a little bit about the Gnostic perspective on this analogy. For me, Gnosticism, as I interpret it, informs the nature of the spiritual war that's taking place on this planet and within every individual. This war is so vast in scope and depth, it's like it was summoned from a D&D game or an epic fantasy sci-fi novel series. The planet is ascending into the next vibration of consciousness. There are those who are actively fighting against the ascension, the archontic force and its representatives. They are desperate to maintain the dynamic of ruling from the shadows and feeding off of humanity's collective and individual God sparks at the same time that they have been keeping us in ignorance of that God spark and all the potential it has to offer. Wars, famine, fear, separation, and a constant state of aggressive and passive-aggressive adversarial dynamism have been programmed into all of the systems of this civilization to keep us distracted from our true selves. Those of us who have awakened to the God spark and have triumphantly owned our PC status as we connect through the heart chakra with our angelic aeonic higher selves have joined the battle, so to speak, in support of the ascension. Our goal is to accept our missions as heroes in this adventure of a lifetime from our higher selves and our soul tribe so we can add our own unique high vibe expression to the planet so that the transition to ascension is more gentle for all of us. In D&D, the player character adventurer knows who she is. She has a definite purpose, and she pursues that purpose with determination and with the support of her adventuring party, or soul tribe, to manifest that purpose one adventure at a time. She doesn't struggle with the same issues that our disconnected egos suffer here. You'll never play a D&D game with this exchange taking place. Lorelei to Brella. So we're heading out to the kingdom of Arconics to free the citizens of their evil overlord like we discussed last night. Why are you still in bed? Brella. I want to go, but all this anxiety flooded through me when the bard played that song about our exploits, and there were fact-checkers in the audience who tried to correct the bard while he was singing, and then he got heckled, and now I don't know what's the point, you know? I mean, like, does everyone think we're crazy? And then I looked in the mirror and noticed I'm not getting any younger, which reminded me of this childhood incident that I thought I had processed already. Anyway, I'm just not feeling up for adventuring right now. I'm going to eat a gallon of ice cream and binge watch that romantic comedy play about a halfling's love for a half-orc barbarian and the hijinks that ensues. It might cheer me up. In D&D, the adventuring heroes relish the high-stakes nature of their purpose. They embrace the moment, in part because they know they are more than their characters. They know they are connected to something eternal. If Brella dies while saving the people of Arconyx, her death will be honored, but the person playing Brella, Isabella, will simply roll up another character or transform one of the pre-rolled NPCs into a PC. When we are disconnected from our higher aeonic angelic selves, we can get lost in our identities as these egos. The egos have a definite purpose, which becomes obvious when you are connected to the one playing you, your higher self. And when the connection is so strong that it becomes your default state, it becomes much easier to identify archontic energies and entities. Just like orcs and gnolls and ogres and evil red dragons represent the enemies that the PCs will have to deal with in a game of D&D, the Archons and their forces are the enemies of Ascension timeline beings like me and you. There is one major difference. In D&D, the heroes will often fight and kill their enemies. In this world, to directly fight with violence an Archon is basically to give it power. You will never win that fight. In fact, you will simply be doing the work of the Archontic force. We fight this enemy with an open heart. We shoot Reiki at them. We sing them songs. We wish them all the love in the world. However, we don't want to underestimate this enemy, as I have done on several occasions. Archons work through egos that are not awakened to the larger, subtler dimensions of reality to help distract us from being our true selves. There are way more people in my life who are NPCs in this regard than PCs. NPCs can be manipulated by their moods and by their archontic programming, and when they are in the presence of a PC, they can either be lifted up and healed, or they can have a much more combative reaction. For those NPCs in our lives who do not have our best interest at heart, or who actively thwart us in obvious and not so obvious ways, we must build strong boundaries. Always send them love, not anger or aggression. But you don't have to necessarily express that love in the same 3D level that they are operating from, because they might not accept it, it might trigger them. But you can always send it to them energetically from the 5D. For my own purposes, the PC I am building for my ego has Reiki, Qigong, and the Wisdom of the Ages as his superpowers. I use those powers to blast archontic energies, effectively sending those energies to the pleroma, where they can finally rest and be at peace. Archons may have malicious intent, but in the end, they are extremely lonely, energetic beings who have been so separated from the God Spark that they believe that they need to feed off of our God Sparks to survive. What a wretched existence. Their time here is ending, and when they leave, it's like what happened to all the individual humans throughout history who have awakened to their true natures. People like Eckhart Tolle, Mooji, Paramahansa Yogananda, and Byron Katie, just to name a few. They integrated their egos and cleansed themselves of all their toxic thoughts, emotions, and negative programming that had hampered their divine expression. They left the prison of the mind, where the Archons rule, and entered the kingdom of the heart, where sovereignty and divine love flourish. This is what is happening, but not just to a handful of people. It's happening for all of us. We just have to drop the NPC programming and give the ego something to believe in. Make your ego the hero she was meant to be. Stay tuned for the next installment, where I will discuss my methods of creating a player character for my ego to embody. It's going to be a lot of fun, I promise. All right. Have a beautiful rest of your day.